And now we are rolling with Corey Carpenter of Carpenter Law. What's happening, Corey?
Hey Joe, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm good. Thanks for doing this. And anybody who's ever watched one of these other episodes knows that normally the background, my wall is this orange color, and now it's gray. So I'm finally updating my office. But it's been a long time coming. I've only said we're doing it since December. So So Corey, before we get into it, it's brokers and brews. I'm gonna go first because in my friend Fadi once brought a arguable less than drink to the table, and tonight, thanks to my keto plan and not having a beer handy, I am bringing a truly lemonade. So not quite a brew, but at least it's alcoholic and it'll help and go down good. So what'd you bring for us to brokers and brews?
Well, first amounts, it's alcohol, and I brought Sam Adams Oktoberfest.
Nice. All right. Well, it's kind of cool in Michigan. Not October cool, but it's cool. So, cheers to you, my friend. Thanks for
Absolutely.
and so we're having some technical difficulties. Hopefully, this works out. If not, we'll have to re-record. And if it's too choppy, I'll do the same. But obviously, I reached out to you because I'm in real estate and I'm in Michigan, and you're primarily in bankruptcy law. At least that's how I know you. And also in
Right.
Michigan, I feel like there's a lot to talk about. So tell us a little bit about Carpenter Law and Corey and how you got started and what got you down the path of BK.
Sure. Well, I graduated from law school in 2004. Did a little bit of collection law, which just did not do much for me at all. So, started working at a bankruptcy law firm in Pleasant Ridge, which is just south of the Detroit Zoo, if you know where that is.
Sure.
And worked there for about 13 years, doing probably 95% personal bankruptcy. So that was my niche. But it just got to the point where I decided I really couldn't grow anymore as an attorney where I was. So I branched out on my own and started Carpenter Law just about 14 months ago. We
Nice.
opened up shop just about June 1st of last year. So primarily, I like to think of myself as a bankruptcy law firm, but I do a lot of general civil stuff as well, lawsuits, defense, or even some landlord tenant stuff. So there's a lot of different things I do. Obviously, with the way things have gone this year, which is a whole lot of bad and little bits of good sprinkled in. I think that bankruptcy is going to be a big thing going forward over the next probably year and a half, after the dust settles from COVID. So it's certainly important to have practitioners like myself out there to help people when they need it. Bankruptcy is a tool that people can utilize to dig themselves out of debt especially when it's not their fault. And COVID has hit a lot of people very hard. And that's why I opened my doors, because I wanted to make a difference in the world, and COVID's given me a perfect opportunity to do that.
So help me out because I think there's a stigma attached to bankruptcy. Um, people say they don't want to do it, and then you have obviously, arguably, some people that do want to do it. But I think there's a stigma, and let's eliminate that stigma right away. I mean, bankruptcy can be due to mistakes or whatever you want to call it, bad decisions. But I mean, realistically, I don't feel like people that I talk to that have either done it, contemplated it, or are going to do it are doing it because they decided to buy expensive cars and houses and credit cards and this and that and the other thing, and then they just don't have money, and so they're like, "Well, I'll just do bankruptcy." I think that's the stigma, and that's the stereotype, but that's not the reality, right? I mean, like, what's the general bankruptcy person kind of look like?
No, you're absolutely right. I've seen it all in 14 plus years of doing bankruptcy law. You've got it's a mixed bag. Um, you're right about the stigma of it, so to speak, where people don't file bankruptcy because they want to 95% of the time. It's because financial decisions they've made, in hindsight, have not been the best. There's been job loss. There's been lags in the economy, especially 10, 11 years ago with the auto crash, and a lot of people were filing bankruptcy. There is that small percentage that is the result of simple, for lack of better words, lack of good judgment, going to
Sure.
casinos, like overextending themselves. But I think that far and away is the very minute portion of people that are filing bankruptcy. The majority are just people trying to do the right thing, and they've run into a rut one way or the other, and it's not necessarily their fault. I've done a few blogs for my law firm. My website is mycarpenterlaw.com, and one of the blogs I did was you don't have to be embarrassed about filing bankruptcy. It is a legal tool. It is a right you have, and it has a specific place and purpose for your specific circumstances that can really help you out and get you into a better place. That is the goal of bankruptcy, is to give you that financial fresh start.
And so, before I even forget, I mean, I'm going to assume it's okay for me to go to there and just basically copy that blog post and kind of push it out there a little bit.
Absolutely. They're on my website. I posted them on my Facebook page. They are there for the world, including you, to see. I have no problem, because it gets the word out, not only about the benefits of filing bankruptcy, but about my law firm itself, which is great. I mean, I'm growing my business now. I'm pleasantly surprised with the progress that I've made over the last year plus, and I'm just looking forward to having it grow that much more.
So we got it on record that I can do so. So that's good. I'm with a lawyer, so I want to have everything on record here. Jokingly, obviously,
Understandable.
but in all seriousness, you should know that you do have like a little reputation. So we live in neighboring subdivisions, and we each have like our own, group. Subdivision Facebook groups, right, that are private. And when people in my sub have asked for all kinds of various things around, like you say, kind of like some basic real estate law or estate planning or anything like that, your name has come up quite a few times from various neighbors. Oh, check with Corey Carpenter, and he just lives quote next door. And then I did a really smart thing, and I joined the HOA board this year, and your name came up from our mutual board, or not board, but management company.
Right.
Um, he reached out to you, and then obviously this was really important to kind of point out. You know, you have your own focuses, and you said, well, that's probably not my specialty. You should reach out to this guy. You know, and I think something that gets overlooked a lot, especially lawyers, even doctors. It's like you've focused on one thing, and I mean that's a big thing, right? A group of things, and like there's these handfuls that all come up underneath it, and that's your specialty, and that's what you do. And if I needed a divorce, I'm not coming to Corey Carpenter, I'm coming to a divorce attorney. And if I needed to, write a business plan, maybe I'm not coming to Corey Carpenter, I'm going to, a business, focused attorney, that type of thing, right? And so I think it's really important to kind of point that out, is that you're always a resource, but you're not always going to be the guy. And that's okay, because you're going to point us to the right person. But yeah, I mean, you definitely have a nice little reputation, at least in our community, which I know, like you said, you're kind of newer to with like your practice and stuff. But yeah, so good for you, man.
Well, I guess let me say that I'm very flattered to hear that. And I it's nice to hear. I keep track of some of the South Lyon Facebook pages as well. So I mean, I do see my name thrown around, and again, it's nice to know that people can consider me a resource. One thing I like to keep in mind in my practice is I want to do what I feel comfortable and what I'm confident in doing. If I'm not confident that I can do something, that it's not my niche, I'm going to tell people that, because there's no sense in trying to do something and not being able to do it well. I'd rather someone who can do the job, because not only are they getting, whoever I hand it off to is going to do the right job, and they're getting, it behooves me to make sure people are getting the job done right, whether I'm doing it or not. And that's one of the focuses I want to keep in my business is do a good job for the work that I do, but making sure whoever comes to me is going to get the service that they need. That
Sure.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes sense. And I get the same question like in real estate, right? Um, I There's no legal reason I could not do a commercial transaction. But, and if it's you calling me up and saying, "Hey, I'm looking for an office in town, if you see something, whatever," that's one thing, and I'm happy to help out. But if you need somebody to like search out the perfect location, you're saying that I need X dollars a square foot and all this, I'm not your guy, right? Like there's a commercial realtors out there that's who should help you out. And I've got some contacts for them, and so I would send you that way. And so it really depends, on what we're focusing on. And that you definitely focus on like what your specialty is and things like that. So getting back into it. So like you've said it a couple times and we've met, obviously before and talked and stuff. Like when we talk about using bankruptcy kind of as a tool, um, how or why, like how does that come about? How does that conversation, come to you in the first place?
Well, it really depends on whatever your specific circumstances are. Okay. Every debtor, every specific case is its own entity, it's its own animal. And I mean, there really are two primary types of bankruptcies that individuals can file. There's a Chapter 7 and there's a Chapter 13. There are other types of bankruptcies, but those are, focus more on business, farm businesses, stuff like that. When you talk about Chapter 12 or Chapter 11, or even the municipal bankruptcy, Chapter 9. My focus is really strictly on consumer bankruptcies, so individuals or couples. um, it really depends on what their needs are. Chapter 7 is really kind of wiping the slate clean type of bankruptcy where you've got a specific amount of debt, but you're not really concerned about the property you have because there's really no need to utilize bankruptcy to help you retain your property. So if you have a lot of credit card debt but very little assets, that's a type of bankruptcy, for instance, it's probably right for you, where you're not going to have to worry about losing your assets in bankruptcy. A lot of people think, hey, if you file bankruptcy, everything's safe. That's not necessarily the case. With a Chapter 7, if you have assets that have a specific value above what the bankruptcy laws allow you to exempt or shield, those assets can be put at risk of being used to pay back your creditors. So it really depends on what type of debt obligations you have, what property you have, what type of debt obligations that you have against your property. And so one of the things that I do before I'm going to file a bankruptcy for anyone is I'm going to give them at least an hour long consultation, and I'm going to look at the full scope of their financial circumstances. Okay, based upon your financial circumstances, what type of bankruptcy is right for you? For some people, that might be also be on the flip side, a Chapter 13. Chapter 13 is a reorganizing bankruptcy for individuals where, let's say you got a house and you really need to keep your house, but because you've been laid off certain times, you've fallen behind on your mortgage payments or your property tax payments. That's the type of bankruptcy that will allow you to retain that property while paying back what you have fallen behind on through a structured plan of reorganization. And there's no fear of liquidation of property in that type of bankruptcy. So it really just depends. I mean, I know I'm being very general here in certain respects, but I really do mean it when I say every type of debtor and every type of circumstances is different. And it really comes down to, you've got to connect the dots A to B to C to get to where what is right for that particular person. And it really comes down to what their debt goals are, and what they want to accomplish. And it comes down to me meeting with them and making that determination with them.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, that makes sense, right? Because it's case by case, and just like the fact that you might have a 30-year fixed on your home for 3%, and I might be at 3.5%. There's various reasons for that. A lot of things that went into the factor of coming up with those rates, not just because I had a completely crappy person and you had an awesome person. While that is a factor, there's debt to income ratios and there's credit scores and there's all kinds of stuff, what type of loan we did. Just because you got a 30-year fix, did you take any cash out? Did I take any cash out? All these things. And so I think it's the same thing for what you're saying. It is, these are kind of some generalizations around them. And then we have to have the one to one to understand, one, do you even meet either criteria? And then two, which one is best for you based on your circumstances and future plans and things like that. Now, I'm curious though, going back to the chapter 7 and valuing assets, so to speak, who does that? Right? Like, so I've got some assets that are there, and besides mutual funds or stocks or something like that, some are, you need an appraiser, so to speak, of whether it be a home or a car or, a boat, something like that. Um, who comes up with the value? Does it get challenged? How does that kind of work out?
It depends on what type of asset it is. I mean, if you're talking about, normal everyday household goods like furniture, appliances, stuff like that, usually the bankruptcy trustees trust that unless they're just completely unreasonable, they trust that what individuals filing bankruptcies put down for them as far as valuations. And usually when you're looking at stuff like that, you're looking at, you're not looking at replacement value, you're looking at, all right, what is this property worth in its present condition now? So if I was going to put everything out for a garage sale and sell my furniture, my wardrobe, my appliances, everything, what would that realistically get? I mean, for bigger assets, when you're talking jewelry, when you're talking automobiles, boats, when you're talking houses, it just depends on how much equity maybe you may be dealing with in a particular asset. For vehicles, personally, myself, I usually use Kelly Blue Book as a good valuation guide.
Sure.
There's other valuation guides out there for boats or recreational vehicles like campers and RVs as well. For real estate, like houses, land. A good starting point is always the tax assessments, the state equalized values. Oftentimes we'll look at Zillow, which is usually tends to be on the higher side, but it's also a good kind of ceiling what you're looking at. If there's really a question over valuation, especially with real estate, then we may turn to someone like you to do a market analysis, which I have actually done in the past. You may recall I did that last year.
Yep.
Or if it's really serious and it is challenged by the trustee, a full-blown appraisal may be necessary for, real estate or vehicle or even jewelry. Again, it just depends on the specific circumstances of any type of case. And just to go back and it kind of answer a question you asked me before. I want you to understand, just because I am a bankruptcy practitioner does not mean that my primary goal when someone comes to see me with bankruptcy in mind is to push them into a bankruptcy. Sometimes bankruptcy isn't right for someone. Sometimes they may not qualify because there are certain time limits on when you can file. For instance, with Chapter 7, you only get a Chapter 7, you're only eligible for a Chapter 7 discharge once every 8 years. Sometimes with Chapter 13, you may have too much debt where you don't qualify because there are certain debt limits within that Chapter 13. But more especially when I'm looking at someone coming to me saying, "Hey, I want to keep my home, but I'm behind on my mortgage or my property taxes or my homeowner's assessments, and they don't have a lot of other debt that they really need to address." There are other non-bankruptcy remedies that I will certainly suggest to them that they can look at. For instance, you may have heard that the state of Michigan has a program called Step Forward that offers relief loans for homeowners so they don't
Mhm.
lose their home to foreclosure or tax sale. Uh, Oftentimes, mortgage lenders will offer voluntary modifications of the mortgage so it can rectify delinquencies. So there may be other remedies and options for people outside of bankruptcy. But that's something I like to think that I'm a resource for. Where if they come to me, I'm not just going to say, "Yeah, you need to file bankruptcy." I'm going to say, "Well, here are your circumstances and here are your options, and you may want to consider this before you think about jumping into bankruptcy because it may be more beneficial for you." If
Sure.
that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Um, I hate to constantly say, yeah, that's like me, but I mean, I can relate it to my own business with, just because the house is worth a certain amount doesn't mean you're going to sell. Even if we've met about selling, there's so much more that goes into it, such as where are you going next? What are you going to do with the income? Those are just a couple simple things. So the it continues to be these are in-depth conversations. And while some of them can certainly be handled through a few quick text messages or phone calls, generally speaking, you need an actual consultation, whether it's in person, over the phone, Zoom meeting, whatever, um, just to have the conversation and understand what's going on. Um, I want to get back to it, but I know that you do more than just bankruptcy. What's Is there any fun stuff that you do that we could talk about?
I mean, it depends on your definition of fun. I do some landlord tenant stuff on both sides. Speaking of the homeowner situation and you being on the board, and I have been a member of my board over here, so I know what a mixed bag that can be, good and bad. So I've
Sure.
with our mutual um, association management, I have done some work for him as far as working towards collecting some past dues. So I really, excuse me one second. Excuse me, allergies. Um, really, I operate on both sides of the coin depending on what the circumstances are. I mean, look, I want to help people. I want to represent people. I like to help bankruptcy debtors, but hey, if someone comes to me and says, "Hey, this is my problem, and I think I can help," I'm not going to say no. And
Sure.
that might mean, "Hey, you need a will, you need a couple powers of attorney." It might mean, "Hey, I had a contract with this gentleman and he failed to pay me back. Okay, I think I can help with that and get some money back in your pocket because it's the right thing to do." I mean, that's what I'm about. So it's I learned a lot in my 13 years operating and working at my prior firm, and I'm not here to badmouth anyone. Um, I will just say that I learned how to operate as an attorney by seeing how it was done incorrectly at times, and I
Sure.
think that was a valuable learning experience.
No, that's fair. Whether those things were done intentionally or by mistake, you're supposed to make learning experiences of bad experiences. That's how you normally learn. You can certainly learn by doing things the right way, but you definitely should learn when you do things the wrong way. So, I don't think it necessarily has to be a bad thing to say something like that. My parents made some mistakes. I learned from those mistakes, and that's something that they would be proud of, is to know that I saw this thing and that I, made the best of it, so that's fine. So speaking of fun and, things like that, let's talk a little COVID coronavirus right now. If I'm filing with you, are we going into court, or is it Zoom court meetings still?
As far as the bankruptcy court concerned, pretty much what they are doing is everything by telephone.
Hmm.
The bankruptcy court is not open to the public. Most of the state courts are also not open to the public. Um, some are doing meetings by Zoom. I have a hearing next week. I think the court is in Westland,
Hmm.
and we are doing a Zoom meeting. It is a civil collection case I'm involved in, and it's just a pretrial scheduling matter, and they are doing it by Zoom. It's frustrating, I will say, because at least with the state courts, everyone's doing it a little bit differently. Some have their lobbies open where you can go in and file stuff. Some don't, but have drop boxes. Some it's you got to mail everything in. It's frustrating when there's no consistency there.
Sure.
But it's going to be the reality for a while. So you just get used to it and roll with the punches.
Yeah. Well, so, our DMV is the Secretary of State, and one of my wife's vehicle is financed through Bank of America, and I have a title that says Bank of America on it, but they don't have that copy for whatever reason. And I didn't even realize that my title said that, to be honest with you, until I redid this office and cleaned up a bunch of stuff, and I saw the title. But anyways, so I was on the phone with them, and I said, I don't know, I don't even know what you're asking me for right now. Excuse me. So they told me, and I said, oh, okay, cool. Well, our Secretary of State is kind of closed. I have to make an appointment. I'll do that while I'm on the phone with you, so you can make the note. So this was 2 weeks ago that I had this conversation. So this is mid July, late July, somewhere around there that I had this conversation. And I go, all right, I've got an appointment scheduled. The first available was December 11th. And the lady on the other line's like, did you say December? And I said, yes, December 11th. at 1:30. She goes, "Yeah, I'm gonna have to put you on hold real quick. I need to have you talk to a manager. Like, I don't have the ability to stretch it out that far." So we got it all worked out. But you know, fortunately, I mean, so this person that I was talking to was like in Florida, and again, kind of like our cities and counties and stuff. Every state's handling things differently, so they're used to the DMV being a delayed process, but they were shocked to find out that it was going to be what 5 months or 4 months. So,
Yeah.
so I'm sure, yeah, that's annoying. Trying to deal with that and figure it out. I know from a permitting standpoint, it's been annoying for people because they're trying to do work to improve their homes, and they don't even know whether or not they can go in and file a permit. And so what normally is done at the desk is now a 2-week process. So I have to imagine time is of the essence with some bankruptcies, and this has to really become a real pain in the ass sometimes.
Well, not so much because fortunately with the bankruptcy court, I mean, it's a little more difficult if you're filing without an attorney. Um, because they're not there's certain things that pro se filing by yourself debtors are not set up to do, but with attorneys like myself, fortunately, everything's registered and filed online. So if I've got to file a bankruptcy case, I basically have bankruptcy software. It gets typed in, the bankruptcy software organizes, and it's like one click filing online. That's the beauty of it. So certainly, COVID may have delayed some hearings early on. Some things like trials are probably getting pushed back. Same things with the state courts. They're criminal trials, just like jury trials, which I don't do, but I've kept kept in the know of it just out of curiosity or getting pushed back. But as far as bankruptcy courts now, there really are no delays really to speak of, which is the nice thing because everything's done electronically now, and like the state courts, where some of the state courts are starting to do electronic filings, but really not really a significant percentage of them at all.
Sure.
So, like I said, that's one of the things I like about bankruptcy is the ease of filing stuff, and I don't have to worry about who's open and who's not. It's great.
So on the same topic, I mean, you said you think that your business will unfortunately pick up. Like, you're in a weird position, right? Because for yourself, it's good, but in general, it's not. However, you're here to make the best of it, and really structure that person's future to make it a good future, right? Because I know uh, that bankruptcy sometimes is a big deal for people, like when they're trying to buy a house, and sometimes it's not. I get people that'll say, "Well, I did a bankruptcy like 8 years ago," and I'm okay. Then let's I'll have you talk to so and so, and we'll get you financed. If it was like 8 days ago, probably not.
Right.
It's not 2005 anymore. So, but like, you think that business is going to pick up a little bit because of our current status. What's your indicators there? Like, why do you feel that way?
Well, I mean, you just look at the news, the record number of unemployment. I mean, I still think when you're talking about like the restaurant and excuse me, the restaurant and service industry, they're still not operating at full capacity. At some point, it's going to break. Especially with the federal unemployment benefits expiring at the end of last month. It's to me, it's just a matter of common sense at this point. If that many people have been out work and collecting unemployment for so long, there's certain industries that haven't necessarily been affected. Luckily, the legal industry really hasn't been affected, and the irony is not lost on me, especially when I think about bankruptcies. It's not, Michigan especially. Um, you know, Automobile plants were shut down. I know in April and May. People are just. I have clients that are auto workers that have just got back to work a few weeks ago. I mean, it's reminiscent of what happened in '08 and '09. I'm not sure if it's going to be to that extent. I hope it isn't, but certainly I think that just with the record number of unemployment, and I could be wrong, but it seems to be a consensus among bankruptcy practitioners. I'm not the only one that thinks that bankruptcies are going to be on the rise. Business bankruptcies have already been on the rise, and you can see that in the news. It just
Hmm.
hasn't trickled down to consumer individual bankruptcies yet, but it's coming. And
Yeah.
again, the irony is not lost on me. I don't. I have to make a living. This is a business, but I also want to help people. So you always have to walk that tightrope of, okay, I want to help people, but I don't want to put people in worse position just so I can make a living. So that's one of the things that's always in the back of my mind, and certainly something that I want to make a consideration of when I'm talking to anyone about filing bankruptcy.
Well, I'll go back to a reputation that seems to be following you around, which is a good one, and I think that that only happens um, really because either you're doing the right things, and putting people in the best positions, and therefore probably have told some people, hey, thanks for spending an hour with me, but we're not going to do anything here. Here's what you should do: talk to this person, and you'll be better. And the only other way I think people's reputations can grow is like extreme marketing, and I don't see your advertisements anywhere. So I know it's the previous and not the latter. Um, but I, obviously I'm intrigued and interested in your outlook on, I guess we'll say, the economy locally, because at the end of the day, if the country is doing well but Michigan is not, then that's an issue for people in Michigan. It's certainly an issue for me because that's where my business, is. I only buy and sell houses for people in Michigan. So,
Right.
um, and it's interesting because I don't know what to. I hate. It sounds cliche anymore, but I don't know what to believe when I see the news or I hear the news, because one minute I see we have record unemployment. I mean, like literally record, like worse than the Great Depression. And then the next minute I see, all these job, coming back, creation or whatever you want to call it, and then I hear 10% unemployment, and then I hear that all, and it's like, well, what's the right number? um, I do think, just based on the data I've been able to consume, that we at least have a different scenario, because from the, say, the 2006 to 2010, great recession as it's called, because of the fact that we did have some financial relief. And while that may not have saved businesses, or it may not have saved everybody, um, I think the fact that people were able to get, at least roughly $600+ a week, um, that didn't happen. That didn't happen when we were losing our houses and losing our jobs and everything like that. In fact, because unemployment had been so low, there were still a lot of people being denied unemployment, even though they were legitimately unemployed. Um, there was like this. There was a lag, right? It was like, here's where reality was, but like this is where the filing was. So it was like, reality was that all these people were hurting, but the government was like, no, you should be here. So there was this huge time lapse, I feel like, or time space or continuum or something like that, um, where people needed help and they weren't getting it. And I even saw it from the standpoint of like, when they started doing these programs to finally help people in need, there weren't any programs to help people that weren't in financial need, but maybe, for example, I was at 6.125% interest rate, and rates were in the fours and 5%. But I couldn't refinance because I was above 100% loan to value. But if you were getting ready to lose your house, you could refinance. And you should be able to, but so should I, and it's like,
Right.
just let me make my situation better. And so I feel like this time, whether or not it was the right thing or whether or not it did enough or too much, or, we could probably go in a lot of circles around that. But I do feel like, because there was some financial relief, at least for the individual, maybe not enough for certain businesses, that the individual maybe didn't suffer as much as we've seen in the past. But what's coming is a whole other story, right? Because if your business is closing, like, and there's no more relief, then what do we do?
Yeah. Well, no, I think you make a valid point. I mean, one of the things that I have noticed the difference between now and 10 years ago is, and you can probably speak to this better than I can, is that I haven't noticed a lag in the real estate market the way it was in '08 and '09. I think the real estate market has stayed really strong. 10 years ago when the real estate market tanked between '06 and 10, a lot of people filed Chapter 13 bankruptcies because one of the benefits of Chapter 13 over Chapter 7 is if you have a house that's underwater and it's got subordinate mortgages, you can actually strip off and discharge those subordinate mortgages under Chapter 13. But with the real estate market staying as strong as I've seen it, obviously that's not going to be really an available option to a lot of homeowners. You don't have a lot of houses that are significantly underwater because of the strength of the real estate market. Now, whether it stays that way or not is anyone's guess, which is why I'm thinking if bankruptcies are going to boom, it's probably going to be more on the Chapter 7 side than the Chapter 13.
Sure.
But you may be absolutely right, and it is like you to your point. This may sound like a cliche, but time will tell.
Yeah. Well, just to hit on that, a real big difference between now and then is that when we when we got here, so March arrives and suddenly, the economy starts tanking and things like that. Um, there was a severe shortage of inventory in the housing market. But when the recession kicked in the mid 2000s, that was actually not the case. It may have seemed the case because you knew people that were buying a house in March and selling it in October for like $20,000 more, and then buying another house and maybe selling it in 18 more months. I mean, I knew some people that were buying their own personal residences as if they were investment properties. I mean, it was like they would no sooner move in, make a couple of improvements, boom, they were gone because they paid a boatload of cash. So it seemed that way. But the reality is, we actually had 6 to 8 months, and in some areas, 13 months of inventory available when the recession kicked in. Right now, as we entered it, you had anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months of inventory, depending on your specific market. And as we then, because in Michigan we basically got shut down, it's even worse now from a buyer standpoint. From a seller standpoint, it's better that there's even less inventory because some people obviously realized how much they needed to stay in their home, right? They had to maybe, or they renovated, right? A lot of people started doing some renovations in March and April. They had
Right.
nothing to do, you know.
Right.
So they changed the things they hated about their house, and now they're staying put. And so, anyways, that's a big difference, and hopefully that's enough. There's a couple other things that go along with that. But hopefully, that's enough to be the difference maker between then and now when it comes to home valuations. Absolutely, at some point, we have to see some sort of dip. That's just the way the economy works. The stock
Right.
market, the housing market, it doesn't just go up forever. Um, but a dip is not supposed to mean a 50% or 100% reduction in value. And in 2004, I bought my first home with my wife for $235,000, and in 2013 we sold it for 170 something thousand dollars.
Wow.
You know, and that was up 50 grand. Okay, so at one point our house was valued at about 120, $130,000. So $100,000 loss, which is huge for anybody, but on a $235,000 house, $100,000 dip is a significant percentage versus maybe if you had a $700,000 went down to six. Still
Right.
hurts you. Still hurts you. I'm not saying just because you have that, oh well, no, that's not the case. But big difference in the percentage. Um,
Absolutely.
you should see 3 and 5% dip whenever it happens, but the current outlook, if you will, is that's not happening anytime soon. We're looking into 2022, 2023 at this point, still unsure of when the dip is actually going to come.
Right. That's I mean that's great for you. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's great for in general. It's great for everybody because you know those things happen as a trickle effect of something else. Like you said, um, the service industry, heck, gyms and bowling alleys and stuff still are not open in Michigan. There's probably other industries that I'm unaware of that aren't open, and there's certainly restaurants and bars that aren't operating at their normal capacity. All kinds of stuff. So when those things, if those go under, um, they go under because you don't have the money to operate them. Maybe you also don't have the money to make your car payment or your house payment. Then the bankruptcies start happening and the foreclosures start happening and repossessions. Those all have those effects, right? So I think that there's definitely somewhere in the blend of what both of us are saying, and I'm very cautious to try to not sound too optimistic for our future, but I also want to be able to say, hey, this is what the data shows.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, to your point, you're right. You hear one thing from one source, you hear another thing from another source, and it's like, just give me the facts. Just give
Yeah,
me the facts.
yeah, that seems to be a struggle these days. I'd like to know the facts on a lot of things. I mean, including our COVID numbers, right? It's like, what do these numbers really mean, and things like that. And even talking to health professionals, it's hard to know because one hospital is different from another, and what they see and the patients they treat, and it's tough. And so you can't even get it from the people that are you know in the mix, so to speak, because they have their own view based on their one place that they see versus a global view. And then we ask for our leaders to give us a global view, and we don't seem to get a straight answer. So it's really frustrating for sure.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. But I am hopeful for the future, regardless of what way it goes. Certainly, we're in election year, so it's just going to get worse and worse until after that's done. So I take no position one way or the other. I'm just saying it's going to get ugly. It's going to get ugly.
I think it's going to
Um,
get ugly. I think it's going to be ugly because I think, essentially we have two sides, right? A Democrat and Republican side, and both sides are so furious about things that I feel like there's an eruption waiting to happen from either side. And I just, hope that whatever that eruption is strictly just the keyboard eruption on Facebook and Twitter, not like a physical eruption of, you know, you're this and I'm that, and we fight each other like literally, right? Because that's just not good. So we'll see. All right, so this is like depressing. Your kids are like at softball or something right now, right? How how has that kind of summer has summer been normal? Like we all experienced, whoever you are, you experience some time of not normal, right? Has any normalcy returned to the Carpenter household?
Well, I mean, this is just the new normal. I mean, the kids have always played softball. Obviously, the season got delayed. My two girls are playing. Luckily, they play on the same night, even if they don't play on the same time or the same field, because they're in two different divisions. And now my twins, I have 5-year-old twins. They're playing t-ball now, and I'm actually one of their coaches on their team. We had our first game yesterday, so it's just, you ever seen like a 5-year-old play t-ball? It's just complete chaos. So, but I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I'm splitting my time between here at home and in my office. My wife has a very flexible job, so she's pretty much she said, she's going to be working from home for the foreseeable future. So luckily, it's going to be interesting when we figure out, obviously school here in South Lyon is going to have the virtual start. How long that's going to last, when you can get the kids back in the classroom, hopefully sooner rather than later, but safely. It's just we've just kind of rolled with the punches. So fortunately, it has, besides the added extra stress of trying to make sure kids meet their assignments and get on their virtual meetings at the same time, which I'm sure you've experienced as well. Like I said, it is what it is, and we'll make the best of it no matter what. We have no choice, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. That's what I've told. I've had people, they've been really stressed about it, and I understand. I'm not saying they shouldn't be. I'm just not. I'm like, what are we doing? And that's what we're doing. I mean, I can't change it. I fill out the surveys and I put my answers down. And I think my wife fills out the surveys and she puts her answers down. And that's all I can really do. I mean, I can attend a meeting or I can, send an email. But, at the end of the day, I think that, whoever they are, right now we're talking school administrators, but just in general, they factor those things in. But at the same time, they're in those positions to make those decisions with or without us, right? Um, and while our input is helpful, I mean, I think we saw with the school board meeting. I mean, there's definitely people that felt each way. If you're the board, you know, just because maybe 60% of people say open schools and 40% say don't, does that mean it's not a majority rules thing? And like I said, they're hired and maybe elected or somehow picked to be in those positions to make those decisions. So I just roll with the punches. Um, we've gotten desks, ready, and I think it's somewhat temporary, maybe a semester or so, but somewhat temporary. So I'm not like remodeling my house to meet, in school, in homeschooling and stuff like that. And
Oh, we're not either.
I know some people that kind of are. I mean, I will say remodeling, but they are certainly reorganizing, if you will. So removing furniture from a room, adding some stuff, putting up some wall art and things like that. And maybe I'm just a boring or mean person, but our kids have computers and desks and paper, and they're gonna work from them. There's not gonna be much more to it.
No, I'm right there with you. Absolutely. I mean, it is what it is. They're. It's not my job to amuse them. It's my job to make sure they're learning. So, I mean, that's the
Absolutely.
best. That's the best we can do, right?
Well, and I decided if they're going to go to back to school virtually, then I'll do virtual. So I'm going to get my broker's license and be an associate broker for my current company. So I'll start that when they start, so that we'll all do some classwork together because I've got 90 hours to do that. And plus, since I'll kind of have to be at home during the day, my wife works 6 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. Um, and if the kids are doing an actual school plan, I can't just tell them, jump in the car, let's go show a house at 10 a.m. I'll probably have to put those off till the afternoon. And so I figure if they're learning, I'll learn, we'll all learn, and then we can complain together. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Corey, you mentioned your website, but let's plug right now before we roll. How does anybody get a hold of you in any way that you prefer or like to put out there?
Sure. My website is mycarpenterlaw.com. I am available by telephone or email. My email is very simple, Corey Carpenter at mycarpenterlaw.com. My office phone is 248-327-7817. I always have my phone on me, so if you email me or text me, I am there to respond. I do virtual meetings with my clients if you're not comfortable meeting in person. It's just, again, it's part of the new norm and it's okay. And I'm going to roll with the punches and make sure I can still service people in any way possible.
Awesome. Well, Corey, I appreciate you taking some time out. I know even scheduling it, you're like, well, how about Tuesday? And then I said Tuesday, and you're like, well, I got like these 75 things going on. I'm like, you said Tuesday. And you go, I'll make it happen. So I appreciate you chunking out an hour or so of your evening and doing this. And hopefully, hopefully your business is great, but not because the economy is bad, just because people need your services. So
Well, Joe, I say this sincerely this has been a blast and thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I don't think you have anything left. I got a little bit. So cheers to you, my friend.
Cheers.
And thanks a lot. Have a good one.
You too. Bye bye, Joe.